What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it?
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. Well, it wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it. You know what date is on this coin?
No.
1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here. And now it's here. And it's either heads or tails. And you have to say, call it.
Look, I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything.
How's that?
You stand to win everything, call it.
All right. Heads then.
Well done. Don't put it in your pocket.
Sir?
Don't put it in your pocket. It's your lucky quarter.
Where do you want me to put it?
Anywhere not in your pocket. Or it'll get mixed in with the others and become just a coin. Which it is.
Heresy shouldn't be this much fun. But it just bloody is, my beloved truth seekers. Can you blame us? It's learning contraband truths from wise ages past that not only set us free, but set us loose upon a sleeping world with hell's bells in our hands. It's gaining the ability to sing like Orpheus and tame the kingdoms of Hades, instead of having to listen to the lullaby of hating angels that has killed us softly inside with their song.
Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
It's having a near-life experience. It's mining the soul for the Swiss bank accounts of the collective unconscious. It's choice from the norm and the average. It's thinking outside Gaia's slimy box. It's a counterculture milkshake sprinkled with red pills.
Now, this first attack was a test of our strength. The next will be a test of our weakness. Now we can sit here and discuss it, or you can try and help me.
Most of all, it's being all that you can be. A term actually coined by Giordano Bruno, and not the Marines, when he himself discovered the nuclear rush of gnosis. Or like Jesus says in the Gospel of Tommy, there is light within a person of light, and it shines on the whole world.
You want to see a miracle, son? Be the miracle.
We are shining like frackin' crazy diamonds, my beloved truth seekers. And that's because we have arrived like every week from the cosmic rat race or mouse laboratory to Aeon Byte Gnostic radio. Broadcast from the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where East meets West, through the GodAboveGod.com. Welcome with kindness and love, two of the pillars of Gnosis, as Jesus describes in the secret book of James, to that dream of you, that encounter with the authentic you, that potential of all of the yous.
If you wake up at a different time, in a different place, could you wake up as a different person?
Aeon Byte is the revolution of the mind and the spigot to liberate Hypatia of Alexandria and what she represents. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything, including that heroic you, what truly defines you, that offers you the path you were meant to take to become an immortal constellation. We are not bigoted, but certainly like to stereotype, because political correctness has been a steely gauntlet around Western man's nutsack for far too long.
You are discarded. You are the refuse of the past.
We don't discuss politics here, because Satan has occupied that domain of emotion harp strings, house-dividing rhetoric, and slogans that look great on signs but are ultimately Dairy Queen civics. Like a saying goes, capitalism is a system that gives man the power to screw over another man. Socialism is a system that does the exact opposite.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Or like Freud once said, men are more moral than they think, and far more immoral than they can imagine. No, by drawing from the supernal mind of the pleroma, we are using our imagination, creativity, artistry, scholarship, intuition to find better ways not to change the world because the world is lost, but to create cracks in the fabric of reality that will allow more light in. Reality bites, and here at Aeon Byte, we're biting back.
As long as the Matrix exists, the human race will never be free.
Because we are the Gnostics, the lovers of the esoterica, and the Dionysian freethinkers. We are the lords of deconstruction, the revenge of the myth upon our oppressors, and the word made unflesh. We are modern-day Tom Sawyers, literalist hunting master chiefs, and the spiritual descendants of Seth. Not exactly Seth MacFarlane or Seth Gruden, but along those lines, because as several scholars have pointed out, the Gnostics were not only history's great poets, but also statesmen of parody, because they saw the universe as a tattered carnival, where Jehovah ran mankind like a ringleader Benny Hill.
Slugs! He created slugs! Are we not in the hands of a lunatic?
And lastly, we are carrying the batons, tear gas, and rubber bullets of truth and virtue against the New Age and fundagelical occupiers of our consciousness, some that have been torturing us since our childhood. So get out of the parks of our perception, you homophobes, Hell FedEx representatives, and Penn State shower rape children of the God of this world. Take your apocalypses, closeted gay leaders, and mega churches to one of the coin-operated stargates.
All you have to do is track down fugitives and haul their asses over to a portal to hell. Easy.
What do you mean by portal?
Well, any place that seems like hell on earth is hell on earth. Like the DMV on Union Street.
And you too, oh you granola, crystal manipulating spiritual Ewoks who badly reconstruct ancient religions or just water down great theologies. Go take a bong hit and loiter Trader Joe's until they kick you out for preaching about the 2012 or the last failed apocalypse, which was on 11/11/11.
You're messing with my Zen thing, man.
I mean, that did happen last week, my beloved Truth Seekers. Did you feel anything on November 11, 2011? Did New Agers and lukewarm neo-pagans have a successful little apocalypse? A precursor of the 2012 Hippie-geddon? Was there a cosmic consciousness shared by Jamba Jews attending yuppies? Did Whole Foods employees feel a higher state of awareness? Did the lamb lie down with the prius? Did we get an extra circle of life? We are the world, occupy Wall Street, and get a venereal disease.
My mind is aglow with whirling, transient nodes of thought, careening through a cosmic vapor of invention.
Ditto.
And did Steve Jobs and the Burning Man rise from the grave together and proclaim the gospel of the hipster? Or are we still a sea monkey generation lost in space, lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year, running over the same old ground. And what have we found? Same old fears.
Were you going to plagiarize the whole thing for us? Do you have any thoughts of your own on this matter?
In any event, are you ready to write your own gospel and live your own myth? I hope so, because on this November 19th, the year of our Demiurge 2011, we've got a game-changing show that I'm very excited about because it deals with one of the greatest works of fiction of the 20th century. Furthermore, more and more scholars are realizing it's an actual Gnostic Gospel, and that is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
To better elucidate this, we have a true expert who has been doing research on the purposely Gnostic philosophy of Blood Meridian and other McCarthy novels. And that is the very erudite and spirited Petra Mundig, whose article Terra Damnata, the anti-cosmic mysticism of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, more than proves the Gnosticism of Blood Meridian, as well as other novels like No Country for Old Men, All the Pretty Horses, The Road, and others.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You can find this sweeping article in the latest issue of the Gnostic Journal number 4. And I wouldn't waste a Smurf's ejaculation going out and buying both Blood Meridian and the Gnostic Journal 4. It's truly amazing how a Western that is easily the most violent, gory, amoral, existentialist, and pretty much nihilistic piece can be a bona fide Gnostic Gospel. But it is, because it does reflect the kenoma, or the emptiness of the cosmos, and somewhere in the desert of the real, in this terra damnata, there are shards of light, of divinity scattered, if you look real hard, like you must do every waking moment of your counterfeit life.
It's like God's vagina.
If you have any more doubts on McCarthy, even after our interview, please read Petra's other articles that include Striking the Fire Out of the Rock, Gnostic Theology in Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, published in South Central Review, The Illusion of Proximity, The Ex-Priest and the Heretic in Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing, published in Southwestern American Literature, The Right and God-Made Son, Fate, Death, and Salvation in Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing, published in Southwestern American Literature, and Disciples of a New Faith, Satanic Parody in Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, published in Sacred Web, a journal of tradition and modernity.
Do I make myself clear?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Petra has recently completed her PhD at the University of Western Australia and is currently working on a complete book on McCarthy and his violent mysticism. We can't wait, and can't wait to have her back to discuss it at Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. There are no web links to Petra because, being a smart scholar, she knows that any internet footprint, like Facebook, blogs, or Twitter, is a recipe for the poisoning of attention span and critical thinking.
Shh! I need silence to mind meld with the internet.
There's a reason she can pump out these spiritual uterus blowing articles and still look good in heels, while other post stupid meme generator pics with cats saying funny things or pre-packaged sentences from wise people on their walls that do nothing but make them further anal victims of Jehovah and his galactic football showers.
Have you ever been in a
In a Turkish prison.
And do I have any of these social networks? Of course not. I pay my assistant, Scott Baio, to take care of these things, so I can write my vacuous introductions. Charles in charge.
You don't know what you're talking about, do you?
Blood Meridian affected me, opened the channels of communication with the Aeons as much as Philip K. Dick's Valis. Like Eric Davis said, the Gnostics in a sense were wordsmiths that crackled with a science fiction sensibility. I've already said how we can fight the system, and it won't be by force, it will be by art and ideas. That is a clue in Philip K. Dick's famous line, "To fight the empire is to be infected by its derangement. Whoever defeats the empire becomes the empire. It proliferates like a virus. Thereby it becomes its enemies." We're not fighting the empire, my beloved truth seekers. We're transcending it and making it transparent at the same time, so it can see it's a copy of the eternal realm and hopefully dissolve or return home with all of us.
Every single man or woman who has stood their ground, everyone who has fought an agent has died. But where they have failed, you will succeed.
Why?
Their strength and their speed are still based in a world that is built on rules. Because of that, they will never be as strong or as fast as you can be.
Anywho, the novel is amazing, as Petra and I will discuss. There is something metaphysically gritty about Westerns that brings out the worst in Gaia's moods, that shells mundane morality to expose the human heart of darkness, and that makes life cheap and thus makes living and meaning so desperately valuable.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
And there is always that ecstasy of gold hidden in the wilderness, or the small actions of fallen men in Westerns, that alchemical symbol of the divine spark, or what is eternal. So next time you watch a spaghetti Western with Clint Eastwood, I hope you see it with new eyes. The one character that is truly memorable is the judge. Some scholars say he is the most poignant personality since Milton's Satan.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is that it?
He reminds me of Judas in the Gospel of Judas, because he's preggers with gnosis, and in a sense he is the demiurge incarnate on earth. He is indestructible, Luciferian in his teachings of man, and his vision sees all points at once. The judge is a scientist, an artist, a philosophical orator, a hero, and also happens to be a sociopath, pedophile, and serial killer. The difference is that he is far superior than the Jesus character and the divine providence in the story, for the most part. And that is scary, because we symbolize the protagonist in Blood Meridian. Failed messiahs manipulated by the Archons.
I'm here on the ground with my nose in it since the whole thing began. I've nurtured every sensation man has been inspired to have. I cared about what he wanted, and I never judged him. Why? Because I never rejected him, in spite of all his imperfections. I'm a fan of man! I'm a humanist.
The judge is completely terrifying, as he's neither nature nor humanity, nor even prosaic divinity. He is the closest representation of Nietzsche's Uberman I've ever read. I hope I never meet him, even in my dreams.
I won't tell you can save yourself, because you can't.
Tarantino wishes he could write anything close to the judge or any characters in Blood Meridian, including their arresting dialogue. I could quote the judge for hours, but let me give you some of his more memorable speeches to the bloodthirsty gang that for some reason he wants to educate into the higher aspects of reality. And of course, as Satan or Yaldabaoth, you never know if what he says is true or half a truth. And like William Blake wrote, a truth with bad intent is worse than all the lies you can invent.
Mulder, the truth is out there, but so are lies.
The judge tilted his great head and said, "The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden lives in mystery and fear. Superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode the deeds of his life. But that man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will by the decision alone have taken charge of the world, and it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the term of his own fate."
Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
And here's a second one. "It makes no difference what men think of war," said the judge. "War endures. As well ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. That is the way it was and will be. War is the ultimate game, because war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. War is God.
The Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand.
And of course, my beloved truth seekers, that could mean God is war, wouldn't it? But enough of my drivel and the judge's beguiling words. Let us to Petra Mundic to discuss Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian and other works. But I must warn you that Petra does give spoilers when she gives a summation of Blood Meridian, so you might want to skip it. Oh, and this is Abraxas in his mortal incarnation of Miel Connor, broadcasting from Terra Damnata. This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we have the pleasure of being joined by Petra Mundic to discuss her article Terra Damnata, the anti-cosmic mysticism of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, or the evening redness in the West. How are you doing today, Petra?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, just wonderful. Again, thank you very much for joining Aeon Byte and talking about a very edgy subject, which is right up our alley.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure's all ours. Petra, you mentioned several scholars in your article Terra Damnata who speak of the Gnostic proclivities in McCarthy's fiction. When did you become convinced, and what drove you to write such an exhaustive article on Blood Meridian?
Well, at first I was just interested in McCarthy as a mystic in general. I was looking for the perennial philosophy in his works. And I noticed the presence of this, his fascination with evil, and that there was something fundamentally wrong with existence. But I put it down to a sort of Buddhist, like the Buddhist idea that existence is suffering was essentially the first noble truth of the Buddha. And I tried to make it fit into the perennial philosophy. And then I came across a brilliant article written by Leo Doherty in 1994, who was the first scholar who identified Gnosticism in McCarthy's work. And suddenly I had this light bulb moment and it all made sense. I felt that even though he was still in line with the perennial philosophy, his focus was fundamentally a Gnostic one, McCarthy's. And because Leo, he wrote a rather short article and he expressed the wish that other scholars would go on to explore Gnosticism in more depth in the novel and in other McCarthy works. So I picked up the project and decided I would try to unpack all the Gnostic symbols in the novel and in his other novels too.
Yeah, and certainly even the great Harold Bloom, who's a self-designated Gnostic, he mentions that McCarthy is a Gnostic.
That's right. He says he's a very knowing Gnostic, whereas he also says that a lot of American novelists are either knowing or unknowing Gnostics. That they have this. You can trace the tradition back to Herman Melville, who was a very obvious Gnostic, and that a lot of American novelists have this kind of dissatisfaction with existence and this desire for transcendence, which is strikingly Gnostic in its presentation. So McCarthy's part of this tradition, I think, of Gnosticism in American literature, which is something that fascinates me.
Yeah, it must be something with the American matrix that's so soaked in Jesus and blood. I mean, it's part of our essence, if you would, and somehow Gnostic truths come through. But although a recluse, has Cormac McCarthy come out on the record and mentioned the Gnostics, or at least anything mystical or esoteric that informed his stories?
He does leave little clues about Gnosticism, which I'll get into in a second, but the most obvious comment that he's made was in a rare interview with, I think it was James Wallace, Gary Wallace, sorry. And McCarthy said that he had tried LSD to enhance a spiritual epiphany, and it said that it helped open his eyes to other ways of knowing. And he basically talks about things like the transcendent unity of religions, basically. He said he's read William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience, and he believes that this epiphanic glimpse into the nature of reality with a capital R is something that can be experienced in any religious tradition. And he thinks that, I'll quote him. He says, "The mystical experience is a direct apprehension of reality, unmediated by symbol." And he also says that those who have not had a religious experience cannot comprehend it through second-hand accounts. So that's classic, a very classic approach to mysticism, which you'll get in the perennial philosophy as well as in Gnosticism, that it's got to be a direct apprehension, a direct personal apprehension, that it's no good reading the Bible or reading a religious text. You're not going to get enlightened that way or get gnosis through second-hand accounts. You've got to meditate, you've got to have this experience directly yourself in order to be changed by it. So that's something that he said himself in a very rare interview. So I think that that's a good foundation for looking at mysticism in his works. When the writer admits that he's interested in mysticism, I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm not, reading too much into him when I look for it there.
Yeah, they're going to run into the Gnostics sooner or later.
Yeah.
Did he ever mention anything about Carl Jung at all? That he's usually a biggie with so many writers, Gnostic writers like Philip K. Dick or William Burroughs. I love Jung.
I do too. I think he's way better than Freud.
That's not much.
But he doesn't mention him directly because he doesn't give a lot of interviews, but I do notice Jungian themes in his work. He does have this preoccupation with dreams. A lot of revelation comes through dreams in his novels. And he has this, it's a bit esoteric, but in the novel there's a reference to the sun as a malevolent phallus sort of throbbing on the horizon, which is a great image. And the idea is that the wind is blowing out of the sun, and the sun is this malevolent phallic entity. And this is the only other time I've come across this image anywhere else is in Jung's writings, when Jung had a patient who had this exact same dream, that the sun had a phallus on it, and then there was a wind blowing out of the sun, and Jung traced it back to an ancient Mithraic symbol of the phallus solaris. So I think there's all these esoteric links between, Hermetic traditions, between esoteric philosophies and Jungian symbolism, archetypes, dreams. There are all kinds of... McCarthy's work is very rich, and I think there's lots of symbols that can be unpacked. But I was going to mention earlier little clues. The only time McCarthy actually uses the word Gnostic, which he does once, is in his novel, his rather autobiographical novel called Subtlety, which is about a young man growing up in Knoxville, which is where McCarthy also grew up. And at the end of the novel, the slums of Knoxville are being torn down to build a highway, and Subtlety, the protagonist, is watching the construction take place, and the narrative voice says that the workers looked like Gnostic workmen who would have donned the shabby shapeshirt that masks the higher world of form. So in that sentence, we know that McCarthy is aware of Gnosticism, and that is not just an accident that he has so many Gnostic themes in his novels. And the other little clue that struck me is in Blood Meridian, in chapter 15. You know, at the beginning of the novel, there are lots of little subheadings before each chapter, like in the Victorian tradition. Yeah. And in chapter 15, one of the subheadings is actually the Ogdoad, which is a very Gnostic concept of, it's the pleroma, it's the eighth heaven, the fullness of being. But in this sense, it's, each little subheading is like a clue that refers to a particular scene in the novel. And the Ogdoad actually refers to this grotesque scene where the Glantengan come across a circle of 8 decapitated heads arranged in a perfect circle, and the judge encircles them, circles around them, and then knocks one of them over with his boot. I guess you could read something into it like that he's reducing the Ogdoad to the Septimad, which is the realm of the demiurge, or something like that. But the point is that the fact that the word Ogdoad is there means that McCarthy knows what it is, that he's read some Gnostic texts or some Hermetic texts.
Yeah, that's definitely only used in Gnostic texts.
Yeah,
so,
it's a
especially
very, very
Sethian texts. But he also seems to be very influenced by Jacob Böhme. And obviously a lot of scholars have said that Böhme's work is very Gnostic in itself.
It is, in a sense, because Böhme views evil as... Yes, his fascination with evil goes way beyond the normal Christian view. He also has this... ultimately, Böhme is not a dualist, because he believes that everything is contained in God, even evil at the end. But I also don't believe that the Gnostics in their highest, most sophisticated form are actually dualists. I know that Gnosticism and Manichaeanism are almost synonymous with dualism, but I think ultimately the idea is that that there can be nothing other to the absolute, that the alien God is everything. And I think Philip K. Dick had he used the metaphor that the demiurge was like a reflection, just a mere reflection of the alien God, but he was evil in that he mistook his existence as being ultimate. He didn't understand that he was only a reflection. He tried to put himself up as the ultimate, and that's where he's mistaken. That's where the ignorance and the evil comes from, and the desire to be the ultimate God when he's only a mere reflection or a mere aberration. So I think, like in the Sethian Valentinian school, it really is a sort of monism, ultimately, Gnosticism. And I see a similar thing in Böhme, a kind of dualism that is ultimately a monism in its most sophisticated form, that ultimately there can only be the one, because everything else there can be nothing other to the absolute.
And Petra, could you give us a brief overview of the plot of Blood Meridian for the listeners who should be ashamed they haven't read it by now?
Oh, yes, they should. They should. It's an absolute classic. They should run and pick up a book right after this interview. So basically, to summarize it as quickly as possible, I would say it begins with the kid who's a teenage runaway. He wanders through East Texas and comes across he joins up with a U.S. Army of filibusters who are led on a mission by Captain White and they're planning to enter Mexico. Well, they do enter Mexico. They're attacked by a band of Comanches and they're broken up. The kid survives along with another character called Toadvine, and consequently the kid and Toadvine join up with scalp hunters, Glanton's gang of scalp hunters. They've been hired to kill Apaches and other marauding Indians and protect Mexican villages to protect villages, but eventually they end up scalping anyone with dark skin. They scalp peaceful Indians, they scalp unprotected Mexican villagers. They become completely debauched. There's just a long catalogue of the most amazing scenes of violence and rape and just unimaginable things that I can't even get into at the moment.
Yeah, it's the most violent novel I've ever read.
Me too. Just the catalogue of atrocities is just beyond description. So after months of this debauchery, they settle down at a ferry station on the Yuma, at Yuma, Arizona, and they amassed a huge fortune by robbing people who want to use the ferry. And in the end, they're attacked by a group of Yuma Indians or Native Americans, and most of the Glanton gang is killed, including Glanton, except the kid, Toadvine, the judge, Tobin, the ex-priest, and the character known as the idiot, the fool, survive, and they wander through the desert for a while. In the end, the kid gets separated from the others and is imprisoned for the atrocities. The judge visits him in prison and blames him for the end of the Glanton gang. In the end, the kid is released, and then the novel compresses several decades into just a few pages, and the kid wanders across the American West for the decades until he comes to a saloon in Fort Griffin, where he meets the judge again. The judge says a lot of cryptic things to him, and as the kid heads out to the outhouse, he meets the judge, and something terrible happens to him. We're not told what exactly. We assume that he's been killed by the judge. We're not sure how. All we know is that when two men come into the outhouse, they simply say, oh God, and they don't tell you what they see, but they see something dreadful. And the novel closes with this mysterious epilogue of a allegorical sort of figure crossing the plain, striking fire out of the rock, which I'll get into later. So that's the novel summarized as succinctly as I can without getting into too much detail. But it's not so much about the plot as it is about the richness of language. I think the novel is at times like a prose poem. It's an amazing literary feat. McCarthy, at times it's almost like reading the King James Bible. There's such a sonorous, beautiful quality to the language. I feel it's a really rare achievement.
Oh, I agree. It's you just get enraptured in his dialogue, and sometimes you forget you're in the middle of this gore fest.
That's right.
This horrible, wanton gore fest, and you're like, but it's so beautiful.
That's so true. There's such a contrast between the atrocities and the hideousness of the violence and this beautiful, beautiful language, which really does remind me of the King James Bible at times. It's so poetic and sonorous, and it's such a jarring juxtaposition, this beauty and this horror.
And what about this kid? Because it seems, and I know you mentioned it in your article, but it seems it starts out almost biblical. A child is born, and he leaves home to find himself. But then that gets squashed immediately. Who's the kid? Who's the narrator? Is it us? Is it humanity? I mean, what have they said? What do you think?
I think I've written an article on the kid. Well, I've written several articles on Blood Meridian because it's such a complex novel. I'm trying to unpack everything in a separate article. And he's almost like a failed messiah at times. He is born, when he's born, the stars fall from the heavens. There's such a prophetic quality to it. He wanders through the wilderness at the end of his life. He has lots of messianic themes. In his wanderings, he comes across a burning tree in the desert. Lots of themes from the Bible, from traditional tropes of prophets and messiahs, but he never really quite achieves any kind of transcendence or gnosis or redemption. I think a great instance of this is when, after his many years of wanderings, he comes across the scene of slaughter. There's been a whole group of penitents slaughtered, and he sees an old woman kneeling with a blue shawl around her head. And the shawl is decorated with moons and stars. And immediately one thinks of the Virgin of Guadalupe, the famous image with the moons and stars on the blue shawl. And you expect a kind of religious redemption because she's such a Virgin Mary figure. He approaches her and he speaks to her and he confesses everything to her. And he says that he'll convey her to a safe place and he'll look after her, and she can't stay in the wilderness because she'll die. And she doesn't reply. She's completely still, bent in prayer, ignoring him. So he reaches out and touches her, and then he realizes in horror that she's been dead for many, many years, and she's just a mummified, dried shell, frozen in that position. And there's this kind of denial of transcendence that is characteristic of the kid's experience. He reaches out for things, and it's taken away from him. He searches for redemption in this traditional Catholic iconography of the Virgin Mary, and it's denied. It's revealed to be an empty shell, which I think is is one of McCarthy's scathing criticisms of the exoteric Christian church because McCarthy grew up he's a bit of a lapsed Catholic. He was brought up as an Irish Catholic, and throughout his novels, you get a condemnation of the traditional church. Throughout Blood Meridian, especially, the novel is permeated with ruined churches. And whenever you have an image of a church, you have an image of a vulture dressed in clerical black. So when McCarthy thinks of the traditional church and the hierarchy within the church is really obvious, with this constant alignment between churches and vultures. So I think the kid is searching for gnosis, but he never finds it. He's searching for some kind of religious experience. And I think the only thing that really redeems the kid for me is his ability to stand up to the judge, to resist the judge's words, to not participate in the judge's, the judge condemns him for, the kid has an opportunity to shoot the judge while they're in the desert, and he doesn't do so. And the judge condemns him for this. He says, you're not with me, you're not against me, you're lukewarm. Like Jesus in the Bible condemns the lukewarm, says he will spew them out of his mouth. The judge condemns the kid for not being a full enemy and not being a full partisan. He says, you were lukewarm, you've failed me. And I feel that by refusing to participate, by refusing to either support the judge or even to fight against the judge, the kid is like Melville wrote a short story about Bartleby the Scrivener, who says, I prefer not, who opts out of the game. And I think the kid sort of opts out of the game by not engaging with the judge. And that's the only bit of redemption I see in the novel, is that the kid doesn't want to play the judge's game, doesn't want to be either for him or against him, just doesn't want to participate in what the judge calls the dance. I think so maybe the kid isn't such a failed figure after all. I know he dies at the end, but he continues to resist the judge right to his last moment. And I think that's something in his favor, because I see the judge as most people who read the novel from a Gnostic perspective see the judge as an Archon or the devil. So I think in resisting the judge, the kid is redeeming himself somewhat.
I also saw the judge as a sort of, like you said, Archon or demiurge. But
yeah.
It's not so scary, is that the judge is the one who has gnosis. But that's
right.
Not so hard, because a lot of scholars, when they look at the Gospel of Judas, the ones who believe Judas is actually a demon, but he's the one character who Jesus understands has gnosis. And, in the Bible it says, in the Gospel of Mark it says, demons believe in Jesus. They recognize him while nobody else recognizes him. So the judge is fascinating because, he is the demiurge, but he understands the universe.
That's right. Well, I think a lot of Gnostic, there are two main views on the demiurge. One is that he's merely ignorant, and the other is that he knows but is evil and he wants to prevent others knowing. And I think the judge is the latter sort, the kind who understands himself, but it's not because of his ignorance, but because of his evil that he wishes to keep everybody else imprisoned. So he does reveal a lot of...
Yeah, he does talk about the nature of the universe to the gang.
That's right.
He does not hold back his words. Yeah.
He says basically that the universe is a dance, and if the dancers understood the nature of the dance, they would choose not to participate, and he can't have that. And that seems very much to me, the traditional idea that once you realize what's going on here, once you attain gnosis, you get out. Like even in Buddhism, once you understand the nature of existence, you attain enlightenment. You get out of the wheel of birth and rebirth. You get out of the game. And the judge says we can't have that. You can't be allowed not to participate. And the kid is continually trying not to participate. So I think that it's a sort of metaphor for refusing to participate in this whole mess that creation is in the manifest cosmos.
He's definitely probably one of the most fascinating characters, the judge. What other revelations does he have?
I think he makes several references to what is basically Hymarmony. He talks about... He's depicted as the sort of author of absolute destiny. There's an interesting scene where he's sitting around a campfire and he performs a coin trick where he throws the coin out into the night and it returns to him and circles around. And he says that everything has its tethers, moons, coins, men, and that everything follows these paths, these predetermined paths. And this seems very much to me like the Gnostic idea of harmony, that even, moons, even the stars themselves are tethered and follow the paths along the sky, that itself is harmony, and that objects have their destiny, that men have their destiny, and everything is tied to this terrible plan. And the judge holds the tether. He seems to be at the center of this system. He seems to understand the nature of existence. He describes, for example, there's a fascinating quote which I'm going to read out when the judge talks about the nature of the cosmos, of the world. He tells his men, "Had you not seen it all from birth, and thereby bled of its strangeness, it would appear to you for what it is, a hat trick in a medicine show, a fever dream, a trance bepopulate with chimeras, having neither analogue nor precedent, an itinerant carnival, a migratory tent show, whose ultimate destination, after many a pitch in many a mudded field, is unspeakable and calamitous beyond reckoning." Now this is such a typical view of existence as a nightmare, as an illusion, as a dream, which you get very much in Buddhism, and in Gnosticism too. It's the idea behind films like The Matrix, that one needs to wake up and see reality for what it is. I mean, in the Buddhist Sutra of the Perfection of Wisdom, the Prajna Paramita, it basically says that a star is a fault of vision as a lamp, a moksha a dewdrop or a bubble, a dream a lightning flash or cloud. So should one view what is conditioned. And that's exactly what the judge says. He's basically quoting the Dharma here. But, the devil can quote scripture to suit his purpose. And I think that he's one of these knowing devils. He knows the nature of reality, but he mixes up truth with lies all the time. And he's just the orchestrator of everything. He seems to be at the center of everything. He seems to have everything in control. And, he even talks about how he wants to have everything under his jurisdiction so he can be suzerain of the earth. And a suzerain is like the ultimate leader. It's a leader who rules even when there are other rulers. So he's really almost literally stating his desire for complete dominion over every living thing, which is a very Archon-like, demiurge-like thing to do.
And Petra, if the judge is the earthly representative of the powers of darkness and ignorance, isn't Blood Meridian the heavenly one, the sun itself?
Yes, the sun itself is actually a very evil entity in Blood Meridian. I mentioned earlier that fantastic quote about the sun rising like a great red malevolent phallus, which is one of the most amazing images I've ever come across of the sun.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this. Normally the sun is a symbol of enlightenment, of illumination, of renewal of life. But in this novel, it's always death and violence, and the sun shines blood red. It doesn't illuminate. It covers everything in blood. And there's things like references to heliotropic plagues. The sun brings pestilence and illness and death. People are fried in the desert. And there's a scene where the Glanton gang comes across a group of scalped travelers, and they're described as, the dead are described as gazing up with ape's eyes at Brother Sun, now rising in the east. Now, Brother Sun is, it's a reference to St. Francis of Assisi's, the Canticle of the Sun, where he says, be praised, my Lord, through all your creatures, especially through my Lord, Brother Sun, who brings the day, and you give light through him. And he is beautiful and radiant in all his splendor. Of you most high he bears the likeness. Now, if the sun bears the likeness of the creator God, then, if the sun is a malevolent, disease-spreading phallus, then what does this tell us about the God of this world? It's a very damning image of God. If, this great malevolent phallus spreading a heliotropic plague, spreading pestilence and death, and this is the image of God, obviously this is God as the creator God, the demiurge, not the alien God, not the absolute. So the sun is part of in McCarthy's world, is just part of the mess of creation. It's part of the stars, the cosmos, the earth. It's all evil. The sun is just another aspect of existence, of evil existence.
Yeah, he seems to give the stars, the moon, everything up in the sky this really horrible, almost Lovecraftian feel. But doesn't he give then the earth down almost a surreal, illusionary feel? It's almost like you're walking through a daze all throughout the novel.
That's right. There's this wonderful hallucinatory passages about the void and lightning storms and the unreality of this demon kingdom. Everything it's like a bad dream. A lot of the time is actually referred to as a hallucinatory void, as a demon kingdom, as a bad dream. And the judge himself says that it's hallucination. And this is a very, in Gnosticism and Buddhism both place such emphasis on waking up. After all, Buddha comes from the root word Bud, which means to awaken. So the Buddha is the awakened one. And in Gnosticism, you have the call of awakening, the call of the alien god. It's as though existence were a bad dream. And to attain enlightenment or gnosis is to suddenly wake up to reality. So these constant references to a nightmare, for me, emphasize the Gnostic perception of reality as a consensus, as a shared consensus hallucination, a shared consensus nightmare, which is something you get in, this idea of waking up is the basis of the film The Matrix, which, as we know, has borrowed heavily from Buddhism and Gnosticism. So I think it's part of this Gnostic approach.
It seems in his novel there are always pilgrims in very bad places, either dead or wandering lost. Why do you think McCarthy uses them so much?
Well, I think that it makes me think of Chaucer, who says that this world is nis but a thoroughfare full of woe, and we been pilgrims passing to and fro. And this idea that life itself is, that a pilgrim is like a traveler, a stranger in a strange land, searching for something spiritual. It's a pilgrim is a stranger, and I think this really emphasizes the Gnostic idea that the pneuma, the spirit, the soul is trapped here, like a stranger in a foreign land who doesn't know the way, and is lost and lonely. And I think there's two aspects of it. One is this idea of the stranger, which is, the alienation one experiences being trapped in the manifest cosmos, which is a very Gnostic idea of the alienated stranger. And the second one is a pilgrim is a person seeking spiritual development. So I think it's a twofold thing, both the stranger and the seeker for something spiritual. I think that's why McCarthy uses the pilgrim motif so much, and he uses it in other novels too. He makes a lot of references to pilgrims. Often they appear in dreams, often they're just used as metaphors for something. I think it's this, what I said about Chaucer earlier, that our being here is like a sort of pilgrimage full of hardship.
And Petra, could you describe some of the other characters beyond the judge and the kid, and how they speak or represent Gnostic truisms? I guess the hermit would be one of the first ones, right?
That's right. He says that man's heart is a place of darkness, the sort of heart of darkness theme. You don't want to look in there, which is kind of, I know Gnostics talk about how there's a spark of divinity inside, but there's also a lot of evil, I think, in, that's only the pneuma that's pure, the body and even the soul. The Gnostics differentiate between the spirit and the soul. The soul is just part of the psychic residue that remains here. It's only the spirit that's pure. Everything else is evil. So I think the heart of man is like the soul, is the psychic part that doesn't return to the alien god.
One of the lines that really struck me, and I'm forgetting who said it, but he said, God creates the world just not for everyone. He's right. Playing favorite, and some people are just screwed, which is very much, again, a Gnostic thing.
It is. I'll get back to him, but the other interesting character is the ex-priest who identifies the judge as a demon. He says that, calls him a sooty-souled rascal. He tells the story of how he met the judge, how the judge appeared sitting on a rock in the wilderness without a horse, without water, and how did he get there? The sort of supernatural element of the judge is continually, the ex-priest is the one who urges the kid to kill the judge, who convinces the kid that the judge isn't an ordinary human being. So the ex-priest has some insight into the nature of the judge, I think. So that's interesting. He also mentions that the idea of the call of God, that God's voice is something you hear all your life, and when you stop hearing it, it's only when you realize. And I think that McCarthy speaks about the call of God, the voice of God, a lot in his novels. And I wonder if this might be a reference to the call of the alien divine. The way in Gnosticism one is awakened by the call to return home. I think this theme of awakening and of being called is a very Gnostic theme of the awakening that one experiences, of being woken up by a voice reminding you who you are, calling you back, that sort of thing. I wish I could find this hermit quote, because I do know that it's important, and I've just completely had a complete mental block about it. Okay, I think here it is. There it is. When God made man, the devil was at his elbow. So this idea that creation is evil, that I know that for Gnostics, God who made man was the devil. There's a kind of, the demiurge is evil, but the hermit talks about the evil that resides in man, and how when man was created, there was something evil in that creation. And I think it is quite a Gnostic idea, because the Christian idea is that, man was created good, and then he betrayed God by tasting of the tree of knowledge, and it was all man's fault. But this idea says that at the very heart of creation, there was already evil, that man was created evil. The devil was present at the creation, and that there's something inherently wrong with the creation of man right from the beginning, which is the way the Gnostics see it, that man should not have been created, that creation itself is an aberration, that it traps the divine essence, that, man's body and his soul are basically evil, that it's only the spirit that's pure and that doesn't belong here. So I think that's what I wanted to mention before, about how, when God made man, the devil was at his elbow. I think that's an interesting quote. And that's right, what you mentioned earlier, he says, God made this world, but he didn't make it to suit everybody, did he? So that's another very Gnostic theme, that there are some people who really, evil people who really triumph in the world, and others who are very ill at ease here, who don't want to be here, who feel like strangers, like pilgrims. I do want to talk about, it's not really a character, it's a figure that appears in a dream, who I think is very important. When the kid is in prison, and he gets a fever because he's been wounded and gets infected, he has this hallucinatory, feverish dream in which he sees what he calls a cold forger, a metal worker working at his forge, who's making false currency, a false moneyer. And he's enshadowed by the judge. And I believe that there's two things happening here. First of all, the false coins that, false currency, when it's released into the market, devalues legitimate currency. And the fact that this false coiner is making false coins, I think these are like false teachings that he's disseminating in order to pollute gnosis, to pollute the Dharma, to pollute whatever you want to call it, to devalue genuine spiritual insights. Because, the best way to destroy something is disinformation. When you sort of, you take a teaching and instead of refuting it, you corrupt it, you put an element of lies in it, and that devalues the whole teaching, the way that many religions started off with a prophet who was very close to the perennial philosophy, who had insight into the nature of reality, and then all the politics and all the power struggles slowly corrupted the teachings until they became sort of exoteric religions and power games. And this kind of devaluing of genuine spiritual currency is what I think the kid is seeing here. This false coiner making false currency to devalue the truth, to devalue genuine spiritual insight. And the other noteworthy thing about that is that this cold forger is an artisan. He's described as an artisan. And this is precisely the meaning of demiurge. It comes from the Greek demiurgios, meaning demos, people, ergon, work. So literally it means people worker, which translates to skilled worker or artisan. So demiurge actually means artisan, and throughout McCarthy's novels we get references to these strange allegorical artisan figures. There's the cold forger in Blood Meridian who makes false currency. There's the coiner in All the Pretty Horses who makes coins which determine our destiny, because when we flip them, they land either heads or tails, and it depends, and we make choices based on it. And it's like a metaphor for the source of destiny comes from this coiner. And also in The Crossing, we've got the Weaver God, which is something that McCarthy stole or borrowed rather from Herman Melville. In Moby Dick, there's a scene where God is described as a weaver, weaving the world and deafened by the noise of his loom. And only when the weaving stops can we hear again. And it's this idea, this very Gnostic idea, that the noise of the world deafens us to the call of the alien God, and that only when we escape it can we trace our way back home. Only when we stop being distracted by the world can we find our true selves. And McCarthy has the same figure, weaving the world and totally distracted by his work and ignoring the man who comes to him for help. And these demiurgical figures, these weavers, coiners, cold forgers, they also appear in Satri. There's a weaver in Satri. Sometimes he's referred to as a surgeon. You get it, putting together bodies, that you get these workers, these artisans throughout the novel. And I think they're McCarthy's symbol for the demiurge, because the demiurge is literally an artisan. So I think that's very interesting, because he's hammering out in Blood Meridian coinage for a dawn that would not be. So again, it's this denial of spiritual transcendence. It's a promise of a false dawn, of something that will not come. So this false currency, these false teachings promise a false salvation which will not take place. And because the judge oversees this work, this is what it says, at the beginning of the novel, the kid asks, what is he a judge of? And he doesn't get an answer. And now after this dream, he understands that this is what the judge is judge of. The quote is, of this is the judge, and the night does not end. And, these, either the judge is the demiurge and he oversees the work of this Archon, or this coiner is the demiurge and the judge is an Archon. But either way, this theme is really emphasized by this strange dream of false currency, of false promises, and strengthened by all the other novels in which McCarthy equates the god of this world with a craftsman, with a rather sinister artisan figure, which is just pure Gnosticism in my mind.
Petra, although both Blood Meridian and the Gnostics posited a hostile, defective universe ruled by hostile, defective agencies, the Gnostics saw the divine sparks scattered in the chaos. Where do we see this in Blood Meridian? I mean, what stops someone from going to and say, well, this is just nihilistic?
Yes, that's an excellent question, because there's a lot of interpretations of the novel as pure nihilism. And I can see where they're coming from, because one can make a very strong reading. But I believe that the epilogue is the final word on the subject. And there's lots of other scholars with me on this, like Leo Doherty argues the same thing. And Harold Bloom himself says that there's a sort of redemptive element in this epilogue. And it's a very strange passage. It's in italics, which separates it from the rest of the novel. It's in heightened poetic language. And it describes this very strange scene of a man progressing over the plain in the dawn. Already the dawn suggests, the dawn is a positive thing. It suggests, light. The night is over. So there's a man progressing over the plain, and he's using an implement I'll read it to you. He uses an implement with two handles, and he chucks it into the hole and enkindles the stone in the hole with steel, hole by hole, striking the fire out of the rock which God has put there. Now, on a very literal level, this man is just digging fence posts to fence off the open plain, which signifies the end of the West, the end of the Wild West. So there's a very real, literal, historical thing happening here. But because the language is so poetic and so strange, and the idea of striking the fire out of the rock just so strongly suggests freeing the divine sparks that are trapped in matter. So this man is like the Salvator Salvatus, progressing over the plain, liberating sparks of fire. And he's followed by, McCarthy often uses fire in a sort of spiritual sense. For example, in The Road, you have the little boy and the father is continually telling him that we are the good guys because we're carrying the fire. It's a theme throughout The Road that they're carrying the fire inside them, and they have to preserve the fire, the goodness of the human spirit in this terribly evil world. And you have the same thing in No Country for Old Men, where the sheriff has a dream about how his father is going up ahead, riding out into the darkness and carrying fire with him to light up the darkness ahead. So there's this idea that fire is somehow divine, and that this man is liberating fire from the rock. He's freeing the divine substance from the prison of matter, I think. The other interesting thing is that he's being followed. On the plain behind him are wanderers in search of bones and those who do not search. So there's the distinction between two kinds of wanderers, two kinds of pilgrims. There are those who search for bones, and on a literal level, again, they're gathering buffalo bones to, there was a whole industry where they would gather bones for industry. But on a metaphorical level, it reminds me of the way that the Emperor Julian II, Julian the Apostate as he's called, unrightly, condemned the Christians for their obsession with death and bones and charnel houses. And he said to them, "You have filled the whole world with tombs and sepulchres, and yet in your scriptures it is nowhere said that you must grovel among tombs and pay them honor." So these people who are searching for bones suggest to me almost this kind of Roman condemnation of the Christians' obsession with the relics of saints, with bones, with charnel houses, with death. And those who do not search, the wanderers who do not search, are the people who have absolutely no interest in any kind of spiritual transcendence. They're the materialists, the nihilists, the people who are obsessed with the trivialities of everyday existence. So they're the sort of unenlightened people who don't have any desire for anything else. And this crowd is really contrasted to the lone figure, because he moves with such purpose and he's completely in control of himself, whereas the rest of them, the wanderers, they move like mechanisms. They move like mechanisms in a clock. They're caught up in this clockwork harmony universe where they're not in control of their agency, and they mistake the holes that they see in the ground. They don't understand what they mean. So it's a failure to understand the work of the Savior who's leading the way up ahead, who's freeing the divine sparks. And they see the holes, but they don't understand them. It says they don't understand what made the holes. They think that each round and perfect hole owed its existence to the one before it. So they don't see the work of the Savior. They don't even see the Savior. And the novel basically ends with that prairie upon which are the bones and the gatherers of bones and those who do not gather. He strikes fire in the hole and draws out his steel. Then they all move on again. So it's this ongoing process of salvation, which I think that even though the novel proper ends with the judge dancing and saying that he's immortal and he will never die and that he will dance forever, it's mitigated by this amazing poetic epilogue with this savior figure crossing the plain and liberating these sparks. So I think that apart from the epilogue itself, I think that the novel, despite its debauchery and its violence, there are elements of redemption in the fact that the kid does display moments of compassion. The kid does seem to have a conscience. He refuses to become a disciple of the judge, and there are times when he, rightly or wrongly, when he shows compassion to the other Glanton figure, to the other men in the gang, where he gives people water, he helps them. I think there are these little acts of human kindness for no reason sort of mitigate the nihilism that the judge and the evil that the judge wants the men to believe in. And there's another interesting quote from the novel about the fire. When the Glanton gang are seated around an actual fire, the book says, "They watch the fire, which does contain within it something of men themselves, inasmuch as they are less without it, and are divided from their origins, and are exiles. For each fire is all fires, the first fire and the last ever to be." And I think that really captures McCarthy's symbolic use of fire, that you could easily, this concept that each fire is all fires, the last and ever to be. You could easily translate this for spirit, the way that the spirit is one with the absolute and each spirit is all spirits and there's really only one. He uses the fire metaphor to stand in for this divine spirit that is, he literally uses the words that, is divided from its origins, like the way the Gnostics believe that the divine spark is cut off from the alien god, and that it dwells in a state of exile on Earth. So I think there are some very overt Gnostic references to the divine spark, not just in Blood Meridian, but in other novels too of McCarthy's. So I think that these kind of themes stand against the nihilism in the novel, and the fact that it is just there are just so many strange esoteric and spiritual things throughout it that it's, McCarthy is a mystic. He's very much interested in mysticism, and we can't take the words of the judge to be the correct way to read the novel. The judge is a liar. So when the judge says nihilistic things, we mustn't be taken in by him, otherwise we'll be put under his spell. I think we've got to read against the grain of the judge sometimes. Some of the things he says we can't take for granted, because he's not the voice of the novel. He's a character, and an evil character at that. So then we have to read for clues that undermine the nihilism.
And to finish off, Petra, tell us about your future book that you're working on.
Well, I'm really just extending what I've done with Blood Meridian. I've written 3 more chapters on Blood Meridian on various themes, and I'm trying to flesh out these the Gnosticism and the perennial philosophy and McCarthy's own brand of mysticism that I see in his works. So I'm trying to cover the latter works, beginning from Blood Meridian, then the Border Trilogy, No Country for Old Men, and finishing with The Road, because I feel Diane Luce has written a very good book on McCarthy recently, and she's covered the earlier novels, so I want to pick up where she left off and cover the latter works, and to really focus on all the esotericism and the mysticism that McCarthy seems to be so preoccupied with, and just draw out these Gnostic themes that I see repeating in all his novels and make sense of them in the context of his entire works. I think that's it.
Well, we will definitely have you on back at Aeon Byte to discuss it when it comes out, or even
that would
before.
Be fantastic.
Because we really did enjoy it, but I think that's all the time we have today, Petra. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and giving us a great interview. And like I said, everybody run out and buy Blood Meridian, and you can find the article in the Gnostic Journal 3. Put them side by side, and you'll never be the same again.
And don't read it before bed. It's a bad idea to read it and then go to sleep. I suggest you read it in the morning when it's nice and bright and sunny outside.
But the sun is evil!
That's true, my God. Or like cower in a wardrobe with a little flashlight and read it there.
A fire, yes, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and like I said, we'll hopefully have you on soon.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had it's good to be able to chat and have somebody listen to my ramblings.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
I knew this wasn't done with. I ain't got the money. What little I had is long gone, and there's bills aplenty to pay it. I buried my mother today. Ain't paid for that neither.
I wouldn't worry about it.
I need to sit down. You got no cause to hurt me.
No. But I gave my word.
You gave your word?
To your husband.
That don't make sense. You gave your word to my husband to kill me?
Your husband had the opportunity to save you. Instead, he used you to try to save himself.
Not like that. Not like you say. You don't have to do this.
People always say the same thing.
What do they say?
They say, you don't have to do this.
You don't.
best I can do. Call it.
I knowed you was crazy when I saw you sitting there. I knowed exactly what was in store for me.
Call it.
No. I ain't gonna call it.
Call it.
The coin don't have no say. It's just you.
I got here the same way the coin did.
I'm just an aging drummer boy, and in the wars I used to play, and I've called a tune to many a torture session. Now they say I am a war criminal, and I'm fading away. Father, please hear my confession. I have legalized robbery, called it belief. I have run with the money, I have hit like a thief. Rewritten history with my armies and my crooks. Invented memories. I did burn all the books, and I can still hear his laughter, and I can still hear his song. The man's too big, the man's too strong. Well, I tried to be me, I have tried to be mine, but I spat like a woman, and I soft like a child. I have lived behind walls that have made me alone, striving for peace, which I never have known. And I can still hear his laughter, and I can still hear his song. The man's too big, the man's too strong. Well, the sun rose on the courtyard, and they all did hear him say, you always was a Judas, but I got you anyway. You may have got your silver, but I swear upon my life, your sister gave me diamonds, and I give them to your wife. Oh, Father, please help me, for I have done wrong. The man's too big, the man